September 14th, 1943. The skies above southern Italy were quiet, except for the low, angry growl of engines rising through the morning haze. 22-year-old Lieutenant Jack Harmon gripped the throttle of his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt tighter than he ever had. His knuckles were white, his eyes locked on a distant shadow slicing through the clouds. A German Messerschmitt Bf 109, moving like a hawk ready to strike. That plane was flown by none other than Colonel Klaus Richter, a decorated Luftwaffe ace with over 30 confirmed aerial victories. Harmon was alone, isolated, a rookie pilot on just his third combat mission. He had been told to play it safe, stay in formation, follow orders. But now none of that mattered. The formation was gone, his radio was cutting out, and Richter, the predator of the Mediterranean skies, had spotted him. In any other story, that would be the end of it. The rookie gets outmaneuvered, outgunned, and shot down by the veteran. That's how it always went, but not this time. Instead of retreating or leveling off, Jack did the unthinkable. He flipped the Thunderbolt onto its side and dove. Not away from danger, but straight toward it. The G-forces slammed into his chest like a truck. The wings rattled. His goggles fogged. The ground rushed up like a tidal wave. It wasn't a maneuver, it was madness. But in war, sometimes madness is the only logic that works. In that 2,000-foot dive, that crazy dive, Jack Harmon didn't just escape death, he brought it with him. What happened next would stun both sides of the war, rewrite the reputation of a forgotten rookie, and prove that even the most inexperienced pilot can change the course of a battle, if they're willing to do something insane. Lieutenant Jack Harmon was born in 1921 in a quiet farming town in Ohio. His family grew corn and raised chickens, and until the war, Jack had never left the state. He was the kind of kid who fixed tractors with his father, listened to radio serials at night, and built model airplanes from balsa wood. Flying wasn't just a dream. It was an obsession. When the United States entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Jack didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces before his 21st birthday. He passed basic flight school with average marks. Good coordination, but nothing spectacular. Instructors called him solid, steady, even too cautious. He never pulled stunts. He never took risks, but he had heart. And sometimes in war, that's what matters most. Across the ocean, Colonel Klaus Richter was Jack's opposite in every way. Born in Hamburg, Germany, Richter joined the Luftwaffe in the 1930s. Back when Hitler's regime was still secretly rebuilding its air force in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. By 1943, Richter was a legend among German fighter pilots. He had flown in Poland, France, and the Eastern Front, and now he was stationed in Italy, tasked with stopping the Allied air advance over the Mediterranean. Richter had 32 confirmed kills, mostly British Spitfires and American B-17 bombers. His name was painted on the side of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 in bold white letters. To the Nazis, he was a symbol of air superiority. To the Allies, he was a ghost in the sky, fast, ruthless, and nearly untouchable. Italy, at this point in the war, was chaos. After Mussolini's regime fell in July, the Germans rushed in to fill the power vacuum. The Allies had landed in Sicily, then pushed up the Italian peninsula, meeting fierce resistance from German forces. Every day, American and British bombers flew missions to destroy roads, supply depots, and railways. But German fighters were waiting, and they were good. The skies above Italy had become a deadly chessboard. Every mission was a gamble. For rookie pilots like Jack, it felt like they were being thrown into a meat grinder. And yet, Jack Harmon was about to do something that would change how both sides looked at rookies forever. The night before. It was the night before the mission. The airbase outside Foggia, southern Italy, was quiet. Too quiet. Pilots called it the hour before doubt. When the laughter fades, the letters home are folded shut, and the reality of what lies ahead settles like dust on the floor. Jack Harmon sat on the edge of his cot, boots still on, staring at the canvas tent ceiling as if it might give him answers. He had flown 2 escort missions so far, both uneventful. No contact, no shots fired. But tomorrow would be different. Intelligence said the Germans had regrouped near Naples. Allied bombers were going in deep, and that meant contact was inevitable. His flight leader, Captain Donnelly, had briefed them earlier. It was simple. Escort the bombers. Keep the Luftwaffe off their tails, don't break formation, don't get fancy. If you see something, call it in. Stick to protocol. But Jack's mind wasn't on protocol. It was on the ache in his gut. The way his hands kept trembling every time he reached for his canteen. The way the veteran pilots laughed just a little too loud at dinner. The kind of laughter that doesn't come from joy, but from fear disguised as confidence. He remembered what one of them said after lights out. Rookies don't die because they're stupid. They die because they hesitate. That line stuck in Jack's head like shrapnel. He wasn't reckless, but now he wondered if playing it safe was just another way to lose. Outside, the wind picked up. Dust swirled across the tarmac. Mechanics worked late into the night, tightening bolts, testing radios, checking oxygen valves. Every pilot's life depended on those hands. Jack walked out to his plane. His Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. She wasn't elegant like the Spitfire, but she was tough. Built like a truck with wings. Nicknamed the Jug, short for Juggernaut. She could dive fast, hit hard, and take punishment. If she was going to save his life, he wanted to look her in the eyes. He ran his hand along the wing. Cool metal. Solid. Real. "Don't fail me tomorrow," he whispered. In his flight jacket was a folded photo. His little sister, age 7, grinning in front of their family barn back in Ohio. That's what he was fighting for. Not medals, not pride, just the hope of seeing her again. At 0400 hours, the airfield came alive. Pilots suited up. Ground crews fueled the planes. Orders came through the loudspeakers. The sun hadn't yet risen, but the war didn't wait for dawn. Jack climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, and flipped the first switches. The Thunderbolt roared to life. Engine coughing, then purring like a beast ready for war. The mission: escort a squadron of B-17 Flying Fortresses en route to bomb rail yards near Naples. Estimated enemy resistance: moderate to high. Estimated rookie survival rate: no one dared ask. As the sun broke over the mountains, 16 Thunderbolts took off in pairs, forming up around the bombers. Jack's mouth was dry, his fingers sweaty inside his gloves. He adjusted his goggles, steadied his breathing, and tried to remember everything they'd taught him. Don't panic. Don't overcorrect. Don't chase. But as the mountains gave way to sea and the formation reached altitude, a voice on the radio crackled to life. "Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Looks like Messerschmitts. Multiple bogeys. Get ready, boys." Jack's stomach dropped. This wasn't a training flight anymore. This was it. First contact. The Luftwaffe strikes. The radio crackled again. Break right, incoming fast." And just like that, the sky exploded. Jack Harmon jerked the Thunderbolt into a hard banking turn. G-forces pulled at his ribs. His eyes strained against the sunlight as shadows flashed past. Tracers zipped through the sky, orange-red streaks screaming just inches from his canopy. The Messerschmitts were here. From above and behind, the German fighters came diving down in perfect formation. They were fast, disciplined, and brutally efficient. Jack could barely keep track of how many, 4, 5, maybe more. They hit hard and quick, just like the instructor said. Diving from high altitude, firing in bursts, then climbing away before anyone could respond. Colonel Klaus Richter led the attack himself. Richter was known for flying above the main battle, watching, calculating, waiting for the exact moment to strike. His Messerschmitt Bf 109 wasn't just a machine, it was an extension of him. Sleek, lethal, and terrifying. And now his eyes were locked onto the American formation, scanning for weakness. He found it. A small gap had opened between the bomber group and one of the escort wings. A common occurrence in long missions as fuel levels shifted and pilots made minor course corrections. It wasn't a mistake, but it was enough. Richter pounced. His wingman followed as he dove toward the opening like a knife through cloth. 2 Thunderbolts broke away to intercept, but the Germans had already loosed their first attack. One of the American fighters, flown by Lieutenant Joe Bradley, took a burst to the wing and spiraled down, trailing smoke. Jack caught the whole thing in a flash, a blur of movement, a flash of fire, a parachute too low to matter. His heart slammed in his chest. This was real. This was war. And he was right in the middle of it. Captain Donnelly's voice came sharp through the headset. "Harmon, cover the left flank. We're splitting." The formation was breaking up. The bombers were still pushing toward target, but their cover was thinning fast. And somewhere up there, still above, still circling, was Klaus Richter, watching it all unfold like a hunter waiting for the wounded to separate from the herd. Jack tried to regain visual on his flight leader, but the sky was chaos. Planes wheeled and dove in every direction. A B-17 took a direct hit to the fuselage and began a slow, agonizing roll toward the sea. Its gunners kept firing even as the aircraft tilted sideways. Somewhere behind Jack, another Thunderbolt was calling for backup. "I've got 2 on me. Can't shake 'em." But Jack was too far, too slow, too green. Then it happened. A bomber up ahead suddenly dipped, not from enemy fire, but from engine failure. The pilot was losing altitude fast and swinging wide from formation. Jack reacted instantly, banking to follow and provide cover. It was instinct, the kind they drilled into him in training. Don't leave a bomber alone. But in doing so, he lost sight of his wingman. And just like that, Jack Harmon was flying alone. The radio turned to static. His squadron was beyond visual range. The bombers were pushing forward, and he was trailing in no man's land, a rookie, off formation, with German fighters hunting above. His breathing quickened. Every second felt like a minute. Every sound seemed louder, closer. The hum of the engine, the wind against the fuselage, the creak of his harness. Then he saw it. Out of the clouds, a shadow descended. It was a Bf 109, unmistakable, painted with black trim and the Iron Cross on its wings. It came in fast from the upper right quadrant, diving with precision. Jack twisted hard to evade, and for a moment he managed to slip underneath. But as he rolled out of the dive, another Messerschmitt came up behind him. His instincts screamed, "Run!" But he couldn't. If he ran, the bomber below would be defenseless. If he stayed, he was bait. Either way, he had seconds to act, maybe less. In that moment, Jack realized something. He wasn't being hunted at random. These weren't ordinary Luftwaffe pilots. This was a coordinated trap. A textbook high-low pincer. The upper fighter diving to flush him, the lower one sweeping in for the kill. Only an ace could pull that off. Jack's eyes flicked upward. Through the haze, a third fighter was holding back, circling, observing. That one wasn't engaging, just watching. It was him, Colonel Klaus Richter. And he wasn't just watching Jack. He was watching how a rookie would die. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. His options were gone. He was too slow to outrun them, too exposed to outmaneuver them. The bomber was still falling, the Germans were closing, and Richter was waiting for the inevitable. Unless Jack did something they weren't expecting. Something stupid. Something insane. He tightened his grip on the stick, looked at the altimeter, calculated the dive angle in his head. Every part of his training screamed, "Don't do it," but something deeper, some voice inside, said now or never. He punched the throttle forward, the nose dropped, and Jack Harmon dove. The dive. Madness or genius? Jack Harmon's P-47. Thunderbolt tilted forward and gravity took hold. In the cockpit, the world collapsed into vibration and noise. The altimeter spun downward like a roulette wheel. The engine screamed as the nose dove past 45 degrees. 50. 60. Wind howled against the canopy like a banshee, and the sky became a blur of light and shadow. He was no longer flying. He was falling. But this was not a crash. This was a choice. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, over 8 tons when fully loaded, became an advantage. Unlike the nimble Messerschmitt, the Jug could dive like a bullet. Its turbocharged radial engine howled with raw power, and Jack pushed it to its limits. Inside the cockpit, the G-forces hit hard. 4 Gs, then 5. His vision began to narrow. Blood drained from his head. A sharp pain stabbed behind his eyes. His neck muscles screamed as he fought to keep his head upright. His chest felt like a lead plate was crushing it. He'd never practiced a dive this steep. No one had. This wasn't doctrine. It wasn't part of any manual. It was suicide. Or it was genius. Above him, the Messerschmitt stalled in confusion. They hadn't expected this. They were climbing, setting up for another coordinated attack, when Jack's plane suddenly vanished beneath them, straight down into the lower cloud layer. Richter squinted from his cockpit. "What the hell is he doing?" he muttered in German. It didn't make sense. No one dove that fast intentionally. The P-47 wasn't supposed to be used that way. It was a high-altitude escort, not a dive bomber. But Richter had made one mistake. He underestimated desperation. And desperation has no rulebook. Jack burst through the lower clouds at nearly 450 miles per hour. His eyes scanned rapidly. Left, right, above, below. The bomber he had been protecting was still limping along a few hundred yards away, smoke trailing from its starboard engine. But Jack wasn't looking at the bomber anymore. He was looking for the predator. Then he saw it. Klaus Richter's Bf-109 had broken formation and was diving too, but not straight. He was arcing down on a gentle curve, trying to catch Jack from behind. Jack didn't give him the chance. He cut the throttle for half a second, just enough to throw off the German's aim, then yanked the stick into a steep pull-up. The plane groaned in protest, metal rattling, rivets shrieking under the strain, and then he leveled out, right behind Richter. It took a fraction of a second, but to Jack it felt like a full minute. The crosshairs in his gun sight lined up perfectly. He was so close he could see the number painted on the tail fin, White 27. The same plane that had downed at least 3 American bombers. Jack squeezed the trigger. His .850 caliber Browning machine guns erupted in a deafening roar, spitting fire across the sky. Tracers ripped through the air, stitching toward the Messerschmitt. The first few missed, then connected. The right wing tore open. Sparks burst from the fuselage. Black smoke belched from the engine cowling. Richter's plane bucked, dipped, and tried to roll out of the line of fire, but Jack stayed with him. The Jug was heavy, but stable. In this moment, That stability made all the difference. He fired again. And this time, the Messerschmitt's engine exploded. A ball of flame enveloped the nose. The canopy burst open as Richter ejected, flames licking at his flight suit. His parachute deployed, but low. Too low. The Messerschmitt spun downward in a fiery spiral and disappeared into the valley below. Jack pulled up hard. His breathing was ragged. His eyes burned from the sweat and smoke. His hands trembled on the stick. He'd done it. He had just shot down one of the Luftwaffe's top aces, not out of glory, not out of revenge, but because he refused to die quietly. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the sky. The other German fighters were retreating, stunned, leaderless, scattered. The American bombers were still pushing toward their target. And Jack was still alive. He switched on the radio. "One confirmed kill," he gasped. "Returning to formation, aircraft damaged but flyable." Silence. Then a crackle. A voice, Captain Donnelly's, came back. "Say again, Harmon? Did you say you got one?" Jack coughed into the mic. "I said, I got Richter." Dead silence again. Then a roar of disbelief. "You crazy son of a gun," someone said. "You actually did it." Aftermath and the return flight. Jack Harmon leveled out at 10,000 feet, hands still trembling on the controls. The roar of the engine had returned to a steady hum, but everything else, the pounding of his heart, the adrenaline still flooding his body, hadn't caught up yet. The Thunderbolt was flying, but barely. The dive had stressed the airframe to its limit. One wing was riddled with holes. A section of the right aileron was gone entirely. Oil pressure was dropping fast. The nose dipped slightly with every passing minute, forcing Jack to fight the controls just to stay level. But he was alive. He glanced down at the bomber he'd been protecting. Somehow it was still flying, limping back toward the formation. Its crew would probably never know who saved them. Maybe they'd chalk it up to luck. Maybe they'd never even see the burning wreck of the Messerschmitt as it hit the hills below. But Jack knew. The sky around him was quiet now. The German fighters had vanished. Retreating after Richter's fall, without their leader, the Luftwaffe element broke off. The Americans, stunned but still flying, regrouped. Radio chatter picked back up. Pilots were calling roll, checking damage, counting losses. Jack keyed the mic again. "This is Harmon, returning with damage. Requesting landing vector." There was a pause, then control tower response. "Copy that, Lieutenant Harmon. You're cleared to approach runway 08. We heard about what you did up there. Just bring her home." Jack didn't know what to say. He just exhaled and focused on flying. The return flight took nearly an hour. It felt longer. Every second, Jack worried the oil would run dry, that the engine would seize, that one last Messerschmitt somewhere behind a cloud would finish the job. But no one came. As the airfield appeared over the horizon, Jack saw ground crews lining the strip. Mechanics. Pilots, officers. Word had already spread. Someone had radioed ahead. The rookie shot down Colonel Klaus Richter, the same Richter who had been terrorizing bomber crews for months, the same ace whose kill count was painted in blood on fuselages from North Africa to the Eastern Front. And now, he was gone, taken out by a kid from Ohio with 2 missions under his belt. Jack touched down hard. His right landing gear gave a shudder, but held. The moment the plane came to a stop, crews ran to it, fire extinguishers in hand, just in case. Jack opened the canopy and sat there for a moment, too numb to move. Then he climbed out, legs weak, uniform soaked in sweat. Captain Donnelly met him halfway across the tarmac. "You all right?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, I think." Donnelly looked him up and down, then smiled. Not the usual cocky grin, but something closer to respect. "I've been flying since '42. Never seen anyone pull a dive like that and walk away. You're either the luckiest bastard I've ever met, or the gutsiest." Jack didn't answer. He didn't feel lucky. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt exhausted, hollow, like he'd left something of himself in the sky that he wasn't sure he'd get back. He looked up. The sun was already beginning to set, casting long shadows across the airstrip. Somewhere, a German family would soon be notified that their son, the pride of the Luftwaffe, wasn't coming home. And Jack Harmon, the rookie who wasn't supposed to survive, had just become part of history. Ripples of a kill. Shock on both sides. News travels fast in war, especially when it involves the death of a legend. Within hours of Jack Harmon's return, the story had spread across the airbase. The rookie who barely anyone knew by name that morning was now the center of every whispered conversation, every exaggerated retelling. Some said he dove 5,000 feet straight down. Others said he faced off against 3 Messerschmitts at once. The numbers changed. The details blurred. But one thing didn't. Colonel Klaus Richter was dead. For American bomber crews, it was a miracle. Richter had become a name muttered with dread during mission briefings. His squadron, the so-called Black Eagles of Naples, had a kill record that demoralized even the most seasoned airmen. And now, that name had been scratched off the board by someone none of them expected. In the officers' mess that evening, Donnelly raised a glass. "To Harmon, the rookie with the biggest brass balls I've ever seen." The pilots laughed, cheered, slapped Jack on the back. He smiled politely, nodded, accepted the drinks. But inside, he didn't feel like celebrating. He kept seeing the fireball in his mind. The split-second flash of Richter's face through the canopy before it all went black. The parachute, too low. The silence that followed. Across enemy lines, the reaction was different, but just as intense. In a Luftwaffe field command post near Salerno, German radio operators listened to intercepted Allied chatter. Mentions of Richter's kill began trickling in. At first, they dismissed it as propaganda, Allied lies. But when Richter failed to return and failed to report in on emergency channels, the doubts grew. By the next morning, confirmation came. Wreckage had been found near a ravine, northwest of Naples. The serial number matched Richter's BF-109. His body was recovered, burned, broken, his sidearm still holstered, his parachute shredded in a nearby tree. The official report listed the cause as engaged by hostile aircraft during interception maneuver. Unofficially, the Luftwaffe staff was stunned. Richter was the backbone of their operations in Italy. His loss was more than tactical. It was psychological. Morale took a hit. His squadron flew with less aggression that week. Their formation discipline weakened. German bomber escorts began flying higher, farther, out of effective range. Allied bombers pushed deeper with fewer casualties. Jack Harmon hadn't just killed a man, he had opened a crack in the enemy's armor. The rookie and the legend. Media, myth, and memory. Jack Harmon didn't want fame, but war doesn't ask what a soldier wants. 2 days after the mission, a war correspondent arrived at the base. A tall man with a notepad, a camera, and a quick smile. He had orders from Allied High Command to document acts of exceptional gallantry for morale reports. And Harmon's dive, reckless, bold, and victorious, fit the bill perfectly. Jack tried to dodge the interview. He said it wasn't that big of a deal, that he'd just reacted, that it could have been anyone. But the story was already out of his hands. Photos were taken. Jack standing beside his patched-up Thunderbolt, a smudge of oil still on his cheek. The caption would read, "The kid who took down an ace." Within a week, the story hit newspapers back home. Ohio papers ran headlines like "Local Farm Boy Downs Nazi Ace in Daring Sky Duel." Radio broadcasters retold the tale with dramatic flair, complete with sound effects and a stirring orchestral score. They called it the dive that changed Naples. Jack's mother heard it on the evening broadcast. She wept. Pride and fear mixing in equal measure. Other soldiers heard it too. Pilots, gunners, ground crews. The story made its rounds, morphing with every telling. In some versions, Jack shot down 2 fighters. In others, he pulled out of the dive with smoke trailing, his wing on fire. Some even claimed Richter tried to ram him in the final seconds. None of that happened. But in war, facts are fluid, and heroes are useful. For the brass, Jack's story was more than inspiring. It was symbolic. It showed that America's airmen, even the greenest among them, could outfight the Luftwaffe. It was a boost in recruiting offices, a reminder of courage, and a shot of adrenaline to a home front tired of casualty lists. The Army Air Forces awarded him the Silver Star. His name appeared in the official war bulletin. But Jack didn't feel like a hero. Not really. He lay awake at night, staring at the canvas tent ceiling, remembering the flash of fire, the broken body, the way Richter's plane spiraled into the valley. It didn't feel like glory. It felt like survival. Still, the myth grew. One pilot taped a comic drawing on Jack's bunk, a cartoon of a baby-faced lieutenant riding a missile, shooting down a Nazi plane with a slingshot. It was meant as a joke. Jack chuckled. But inside he wondered, was this what it meant to be a hero? To be turned into a cartoon? What mattered to Jack wasn't the press clippings or the medals. It was that on that day, in that moment, when death was staring straight at him, he didn't freeze. He acted. And in war, sometimes that's all you can do. What the dive really changed. What Jack Harmon did in the skies above Naples wasn't just gutsy, it was disruptive. Until that moment, American pilots had followed a strict air doctrine. Escort fighters were trained to fly predictable patterns, maintain altitude, guard the bombers, avoid extended dogfights, and never, under any circumstances, dive too deep alone. The theory made sense on paper. American bombers were slow and vulnerable. Their survival depended on tight formations and disciplined escorts. But the Luftwaffe had adapted. Their aces, like Klaus Richter, had learned to bait those patterns, to study the rhythm of Allied escorts, exploit hesitation, and punish overcaution. Jack's dive broke that rhythm. He didn't just save a bomber. He shattered an assumption. After the mission, air combat analysts took notice. Debriefing officers wrote detailed reports. Harmon's maneuver, a solo dive at extreme speed, executed with no radio support under direct enemy pressure, didn't just succeed. It exposed a flaw in German expectations. The enemy had grown overconfident. They thought they understood how American rookies flew. They thought a pilot like Harmon would either run or freeze. But Harmon didn't follow the script. He rewrote it mid-air. Commanders in Italy began to talk quietly about tactical flexibility. Squadron leaders started introducing training simulations that allowed for more improvisation. Not reckless heroism, but controlled risk-taking. Calculated unpredictability. It was a shift. Subtle, but powerful. Younger pilots heard about Harmon's dive and saw something more than just a lucky break. They saw permission. Permission to think, to react, to trust instincts when doctrine lagged behind reality. For the first time, flight instructors began telling cadets, sometimes the best move is the one the enemy doesn't expect. That wasn't in the manual, but neither was war. Within weeks, P-47 pilots in other theaters began experimenting with high-speed vertical dives, not just to attack, but to disengage, to reposition, to bait the Luftwaffe into unfamiliar angles. The dive became more than a maneuver. It became a psychological weapon, and it worked. By early 1944, kill ratios for American escort fighters in Italy improved by almost 12%. Part of that was due to better aircraft and growing experience. But part of it, according to several squadron debriefs, was mental. Pilots were more aggressive, more confident, more willing to break formation when the moment called for it. They didn't all know Jack Harmon's name, but they flew differently because of what he did. Even German pilots noticed. Intercepted chatter from Luftwaffe squadrons described American escorts as increasingly erratic and no longer predictable. One German report described a new tactic where thunderbolts pretend to retreat, then dive into unexpected positions. Another warned, "Beware the rookies. They do not fly like before." Jack had forced the enemy to second-guess itself. And in war, second-guessing is deadly. His dive didn't win the war. It didn't turn the tide of history. But it introduced doubt. And doubt, when planted in the mind of a once fearless ace, spreads like fire. More importantly, it reminded every young pilot that courage doesn't come from rank or flight hours. It comes from one choice in one moment. And that choice, when made boldly, can ripple across entire squadrons, across fronts, across the war itself.